When we talk about autism, the conversation often begins with awareness. But what does real understanding look like? What does meaningful inclusion require from families, schools, workplaces, and communities? And in the Bahamas, who is helping to lead that charge? Today, we're joined by Greer Bain, board member of Resources and Education for Autism and Related Challenges, better known as REACH Bahamas. We'll be talking about the organization's mission, the realities families face, and what it means to build a society where different minds are not just acknowledged, but embraced as part of one community.
Vital Voices is a production of Tag Studios and is proudly brought to you each week by our sponsor, Wellspring Lifestyle Group, where you can find freedom and transformation through whole person health.
Are you enjoying Vital Voices? Do you find our conversations educational, engaging, and inspiring? Then like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell to keep updated on new episodes and more.
Vital Voices.
Welcome to Vital Voices, the podcast where we amplify the stories, insights, and expertise of the people shaping the future of our communities, our conversations, and our country. I'm your host, Alexis Burrows. Thank you for joining us. Today's conversation centers on a message that is both timely and important: different minds, one community. As autism awareness continues to grow, so too does the need for deeper understanding, better support systems, and stronger advocacy for individuals and families navigating autism and related challenges. Our guest today is Greer Bain, board member of REACH Bahamas, an organization committed to supporting, educating, and advocating for persons with autism and related challenges, as well as the families who care for them. In this episode, we'll explore the work REACH is doing in the Bahamas, the needs that still exist, and what it will take to create a more inclusive and compassionate community for all. Welcome to Vital Voices.
Thank you.
So we are excited to kind of continue in some ways a conversation that we started on an episode 2 weeks ago where we had Dr. Danielle Moss, who is a speech language pathologist, who was on talking about some of the communication challenges that exist and, just giving people some information and advice on how to navigate that. So as we continue in April, which is Autism Awareness Month, both locally and around the world, we were excited to get REACH on to talk about, what your goals are, what your mission is, how you go about accomplishing them, and where you sit in the space of supporting individuals with autism and the families as well. So, to begin by pulling back the curtain a little bit, can you tell us about REACH Bahamas and the role that the organization plays for families who may have someone, who has autism within the Bahamas?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting REACH, and I'm certainly excited to be here. It's always a pleasure to, play an active role in helping to educate the community and just shed some more light on challenges that both individuals with autism have as well as their families.
Mm-hmm.
So REACH is, as you said, it's a support group, and it has been established primarily to support children
Mm-hmm.
who are on the spectrum. It began actually as a parent support group, and it was started by a group of parents, therapists, and it was way back in 1999. And they established it to provide some type of relief for families who were experiencing a gap, an educational gap with their children. There was difficulty finding placement for their children who were on the spectrum, and limited educational resources, limited support, so forth and so on. And so now, of course, REACH has developed into more than just a parent support group, but offers so much more.
Yeah. What does the name REACH actually stand for, and what is at the heart of the organization's mission?
So REACH, it's an acronym, and it stands for Resources and Education for Autism and Related Challenges. And so the heart of the organization really is providing services and support for children and young adults who are on the autism spectrum, but also who have related challenges. Not only autism, but also possibly, other challenges that are learning in nature
Mm-hmm.
and mental in nature, I should say. And so our goal is to support children and families. And so by children, we provide services such as speech and language therapy, that is free of charge, of course, um, therapeutic summer camps, um, free of charge, respite care, and this is going more towards the family, but it's also including the children because
Mm-hmm.
with respite care, a child would come or a young adult would come and be able to, come to the center for a few hours while their family member, their caregiver, is able to go out to get some relief,
Mm-hmm.
go and get their hair done, go to the beach, just take some time for themselves. Because as you would imagine, being a caregiver for a child who has challenges that are developmental in nature can be very, very stressful and, really very taxing. So our goal really is to support both children and families,
Right.
support by offering services, and our ultimate goal really is to have a therapeutic and a resource center. That really is our ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
A therapeutic and resource center where we would be able to provide services and resources for families and children.
Yeah. The support for families is interesting, um, because obviously, when you think about it, people don't often necessarily consider, um, the hands-on nature of what it may be like to have a member of the family who is autistic or on the spectrum, and then, like you said, being able to go and get your hair done, or go to the beach or go to a movie and things like that. Especially if you don't necessarily have the family support built in, there is a need and a gap. And I think that it's interesting to hear that Reach is trying to help and fill that gap, because that wasn't something that I thought about, in thinking about, some of the things that you guys do. So, you know, this year's Autism Awareness Day theme was Different Minds, One Community. For you and your role in Reach, what does that mean? What does that theme mean to you?
So you may have heard the word spectrum
Mm-hmm.
associated with autism. So autism is often described as a spectrum disorder. And what that means and why we chose the theme Different Minds is because the spectrum indicates that there's a wide variety uh, of differences. There's a wide variety of, um, I guess, challenges, and there are a wide variety of minds. And so we talk about the fact that autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning it is in the brain. It is a disorder of a developing brain. It
Mm-hmm.
is a disorder that is a lifetime disorder, meaning that a person who has autism spectrum disorder, they are born with it, and it remains a challenge throughout their lifetimes. Although not to say that improvements can't be made with therapy. Improvements, and I have experienced this over and over again, where children who have the right therapy are able to make significant improvements. But the theme, Different Minds, One Community, just was chosen because all of these different minds, all of these different ways that a person experiences autism is also encapsulated into this one very supportive community. And we want this
Mm-hmm.
community to remain supportive because we all share the same affliction. If you would, if you don't, so to speak. We
Right.
all share the same challenge in being a part of the autism spectrum community.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are many different ways that this spectrum is experienced by a family or a child or a person.
Right. For you personally, being a board member of REACH, what drew you to the work, and what has your journey been like working with REACH as a board member and in that capacity?
So I am a teacher by training,
Mm-hmm.
and I began to experience, uh, I think that was maybe about 15 or so years ago. I began to experience more and more interactions with children who presented differently in my environment. And what I mean by that is children were presenting with more behavioral differences, more speech and language differences,
Mm-hmm.
more challenges that were not just explained. This may have dyslexia or they have a learning disability. The challenges that I began to see, um, made me curious,
Mm-hmm.
and I was actually introduced to the autism world by a parent of mine whose child was with me, and she actually invited me to a REACH training session. It was people that I interact with that knowingly they knew their child had autism. In the past, I had interacted with other families and there were differences, but I was not aware. I did not know what was happening, and so in that way, I was not necessarily able to work with them the way that they needed. But when this particular family invited me to a REACH meeting, it opened my eyes, and I went to this training session that actually it was several Saturdays, and there was a gentleman from, and he educated us. It was a group of quite a large group. I would say maybe about 30 or so parents, caregivers, teachers, and family members who were all learning about autism, about how to work with children with autism, so forth and so on. And so after that particular training session, that began my journey, and I continued to work along with REACH. I continued to go to meetings. I continued to educate myself. I continued to read books. I continued to read articles. I continued to watch YouTube videos about the spectrum. And finally, I went ahead and I got my master's in special education. And I've ever since then I've been on this journey. And the interesting part of it is that when I began the journey some years ago, I and children, and it continued to increase. The incidence of autism spectrum disorder, according to the CDC right now, is 1 in 31. 1 in 31 children, according to statistics, has autism spectrum disorder. And so that means that in every school, in every classroom, there will be a child. There will be a child who may not necessarily be diagnosed. There may be a child who may have differences in learning. And so because of my educational background, of course, that really, it's I'm very passionate about it. I'm very drawn to understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also very drawn to lending assistance where I can.
Yeah. You know, I think that's it's a pretty interesting journey because obviously, you're talking about um being a teacher and going through that process of recognizing, having a parent say, here's this resource for you, and then now you fast forward, now you're at a point where you're working directly within the organization in the capacity of a board member and continuing the work of the organization. That's really cool to hear, how that came about. I want to move into a space of, awareness and understanding, because obviously that's a big part of the conversation that we want to have. So when people hear the word autism, I think there's still some, common misconceptions that exist. From your perspective and from your work, what would you say are still some of the most common misconceptions that exist when people think about or hear the word autism?
Yeah, this is really very important in my eyes, because I think that a lot of misconceptions in the public sphere. I think that oftentimes, people may see parents out in public with their children, and they may see those children having a meltdown, for example, or they may see the children behaving differently, behaving in an odd way, maybe speaking in an odd way. And, and I think that the one of the biggest things is the tantrums. And so a parent or a stranger may see a child out in public and see a child tantruming, or see a child not being obedient to the parent, and the assumption, the judgment, and I use that word very specifically, the judgment is that that parent doesn't know how to discipline their child, that parent doesn't know how to rule their child, that parent just needs to give that child a spanking. And I think that there's a lot of shame that parents feel because they are being judged whenever they go out in public. And for that reason, we find that a lot of parents, especially in the past, did not go out with their children who were on the spectrum because of the judgment of the public. And so, I think that a lot of people are not aware of what exactly this disorder means, what a family who has a child on the spectrum, what exactly they are facing, and how they as a community can help by being non-judgmental, by being supportive, by not giving that evil eye, by not giving that judgmental eye, by looking at a child or a mother out in public with compassion instead of judgment, and with an eye of, we are here for you. We are, even if we can't do anything physically, just knowing that we understand you, we support you is enough.
Yeah. The compassion word was a big one that came up during our conversation with Dr. Moss. And I think that's an important reminder for people because, yes, there are going to be situations where, the kid in question may just be a kid that lacks discipline. But for families and parents who are dealing with a kid who may be on the spectrum, that becomes an entirely different conversation. And I think the need for compassion is definitely high when you talk about, those sort of circumstances, compassion and understanding. And like you said, not necessarily moving straight into judgment. You've sat in a position, obviously as a teacher and as a member of REACH, where I imagine you can kind of speak to how the conversation around autism has evolved in the Bahamas over the years. And how has it?
I didn't quite hear what you said, but I think you're asking me about how the autism has evolved in the Bahamas.
Yeah, how the conversation around it has evolved. Right? Yes.
Okay, yes. And so I think that there is more awareness slowly. I think people are becoming more aware. People that I meet, I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about it. I honestly do. I think that, we still have a long way to go as far as public education and public awareness, but still, I do know that quite the conversation has the conversation has increased. Let me say that. More people are talking about it. I think that there are still a lot of misunderstandings, even though a lot of families are dealing with autism. I think that there still needs to be a lot of education. I think that the conversation has increased, but not necessarily with all the facts. Let me say that. There's still, there's still a lot of misconceptions, and I think that that's worldwide. Honestly, it's a complex disorder. It's a complex, challenging road to travel for a lot of families, and the fact that that healthcare professionals are not able to put their finger on all of the nuances of this this challenging disorder is, this speaks to why the public is not able to still get a grasp, and families are still not able to get a grasp, because it is very complex. It is it's a spectrum. It's not the same. I've heard somebody say, you meet one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. They're not the same. The challenges are not the same. They are, although there are some telltale signs, they're not all the same. I've heard also autism referred to as a hidden disability, because you can't look at a person and see that they have autism. You can't run a blood test for autism. You can't see autism when you meet a person. Autism is, it's very, very complex. And so because of that, the conversations are sometimes very, very complex and not necessarily as, as clear as talking about other disorders.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too. It's a reminder of, that word of it being a spectrum, and therefore there's a wide range of how it might present, even though there are some telltale signs, like you said. I think one of the things that then comes up as you think about it is, what does inclusion look like beyond just awareness campaigns or symbolic recognition? Because I think sometimes we can get lost in the, we have a campaign or we're doing this, but what does that actually look like in terms of bringing about real inclusion for people and families who are within, this autistic community?
Yeah. So inclusion is a buzzword. And I think that sometimes it's misunderstood, because when it comes to, so like I said before, I'm a teacher. And so I come from the lens of the classroom. And so inclusion in the classroom means something totally different to me than inclusion in society. Inclusion in the classroom can be challenging, although I know that many parents want their children in mainstream school settings. Most parents want their children in mainstream school settings. And our hope and our goal is to try to facilitate that as much as possible. However, inclusion can sometimes be damaging to a child who is on the spectrum in the classroom, and it can also be damaging to the other children in the classroom. Inclusion does not necessarily mean just putting a child in a classroom. And I think that's where we go wrong. Putting a child in a classroom can sometimes, a child who is on the spectrum, in a classroom of neurotypical children, is possible if the child is able to be in that classroom without uh, without needing so much support, if you understand what I'm saying. So autism has 3 levels. Level 1, they need some support. Level 2, they need a little more support. And level 3 means they need substantial support. And so inclusion for a level 3 child, for example, who needs substantial support may be unrealistic, because that child is also having a lot of challenging behaviors, such as lots of stimming, lots of possible, tantruming behaviors, lots of disruptive behaviors, lots of, possibly self-injurious behaviors. It is more possible for a level 2 or a level 1 child to be included in the classroom. Level inclusion in society is another thing altogether. Inclusion in society, to me, means being able to take my autistic child out into the food store, into church, to a party, to Wendy's, to McDonald's, to a fair, to another public outing, and feel comfortable, feel accepted, feel seen, feel noticed, not feel judged. To me, that's inclusion in society. It means that that society has considered that these children, these people, this community exists, and how can we make them feel accepted wherever they are? How can we make them feel like they are a part of us? Because oftentimes, I think that the feeling that they are given, or that families are given, is you don't belong here. You don't belong here.
Yeah. I know we tend to have, as a society, this concept of, anything that is a mental or a brain related issue. We tend to want to put those people in a corner and act as though they don't exist. And obviously that's a part of what you're speaking to, which I guess leads me into my next question, because, and you mentioned it a little bit, it's that idea of acceptance. Why is it so important for communities to move from just this concept of awareness to one of understanding and of acceptance?
It's a human need. It's a human need to be accepted. And just because a person has any type of challenge, whether it is a medical challenge, whether it's a physical challenge, whether it's a learning challenge, whether it's a neurological challenge, it is a human need to be accepted. And we want to move society from just knowing about autism to accepting that these people are here and that they are a part of us, and that they should not only be accepted, but they should also be celebrated, because there are gifts that they have. They are here for a reason. God has placed all of us here for a reason. And so I truly believe, and our drive is to get society to accept that these individuals are here for a God-given reason. And so we are celebrating, and we are accepting, and we are supporting them, not just knowing about them, not just understanding them, but we are also celebrating that they are here and they have something to offer.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like you said, just because someone may have a challenge doesn't mean that there's not something that they have to offer. And I guess that leads me into my next question is, thinking about what, challenges these families face. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that families and children, especially with autism, face in the Bahamas today?
Okay. I think I heard correctly. You're asking me to just talk about some of the challenges that
Yes.
families face. Okay, so the challenges are wide and varied, but in speaking with family members and speaking with moms and dads and other family members of children who are on the spectrum, I know that there are many challenges that can range from eating challenges. So the children are extremely picky. They don't want to eat, and families have challenges just getting their children to eat. From sleeping challenges. A lot of children who are on the spectrum have sleeping disorders, and it is something that the autism community speaks about very often, about giving supplements like melatonin, and having routines so that the children will sleep. I know that those are challenges. So in the autism community, there's something called comorbidities, meaning that people who are on the spectrum often have comorbid conditions. So, for example, autism spectrum disorder is often accompanied by these conditions such as epilepsy, seizures, sleep disorders, ADHD, gastrointestinal disorders, feeding and eating challenges, like I said, possibly obesity, because another challenge is you go from the other end of the spectrum. So there are children on the spectrum who are so picky that they won't eat, to children who have an insatiable appetite. And so oftentimes families have to hide food from these kids because they will just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat until they are sick to that extent. There's also other comorbid conditions such as anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and the list can go on and on. So, in addition to the fact that the child may have the child has autism spectrum disorder, oftentimes families are also facing these other comorbid conditions.
Yeah. No, obviously that adds, yeah. And that adds to the depth of the challenges that they face, obviously, because now you're not just talking about one thing, you're talking about, like you said, these comorbid conditions that can come alongside. I think
I want to just say,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say, and I hope I'm not painting a terrible picture, because I want to I also want to say that I think the misconception, there's a public misconception that all people who are on the autism spectrum also have intellectual disabilities, and that's not the case.
Right. No,
A child found a child who's on the spectrum can also be very gifted.
Right. So, and I found that that's a part of it as well, because you have, and then again, because it's a spectrum, you have people. So, like, I know of people who are on the spectrum but didn't necessarily discover that until they were into adulthood, because of like just the particular ways that it expressed, and it wasn't as obvious in the early stages of life, so it didn't necessarily lead to like what we would consider the traditional communication issues and things like that, but nonetheless they still came to the discovery as an adult that they were on the spectrum. And so, but they were living life. Like, I think even Dr. Moss said, it's like, just because you have autism or you're on the spectrum doesn't mean that you can't have a job and have a spouse and have a family and things like that. And so I think that's something that's important to remind people, that yes, for some people on the spectrum, there are going to be challenges that make what we consider a normal life very difficult, but for others on the spectrum, it may be challenging but still achievable. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
That's important. I want to drive that home. That's important. Mm-hmm. The range of intellectual, the range of differences. So a person on the spectrum can range from impaired to gifted. Mm-hmm. The percentage of intellectual impairments is 38%. The percentage of giftedness is 2%. There are also people on the spectrum with savant qualities, mm-hmm. And we hear about them all the time. In the media, we hear about people with these savant qualities that could possibly have been on the spectrum. And so these are people who we celebrate and that clearly have contributed to society.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you more specifically, kind of just continuing on our conversation of awareness and inclusion. How does REACH help families to feel less isolated and more empowered as they navigate this journey?
So I would say that one of the things that I love about REACH is that, and there are other support groups, and other support groups do this as well. That as a teacher and as an advocate, I I personally, Greer Bain, I don't know what it feels like to live with a child or a person with autism spectrum disorder. I can't relate. I can empathize. I can understand. I can accept. I can celebrate, but I don't know the journey. What I like about the support group aspect of REACH is that the parents uh, they have each other and they share, they talk, they support, they encourage, they share tips, they share, professional, information that they have. They share information, and so in that way, I think that Reach has provided a forum for the parents to come together to be able to support each other by sharing, by just having somebody to hold their hand along the journey, and also to advocate. And so, there are several parents at Reach who are real advocates and who are relentless advocates. I'm reminded of the journey of I guess, of legislation in the United States. And I am reminded that the real um, change in legislation did not happen with politicians. The real change, although I mean, it happened with politicians, however, it happened because parents advocated. And so Reach is our aim is to provide that push for parents to advocate for themselves. Um, because like I said, the real change happened in the United States when parents started advocating. And the real change in the Bahamas is going to happen with parents getting tired, realizing that no, this is actually our children's right, and marching on Rosin Square, going down to their representative's office, writing letters to legislators, speaking with their members of parliament, advocating for their child. That's how the change is going to come. And so I think Reach provides that encouragement and that space.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned that because I wanted to ask you about that, right? Because you mentioned that REACH obviously operates as a support organization for those on the spectrum and their families, but also advocacy is a part of your work as well. So can you tell us a little bit, about the advocacy work that REACH is doing, and then how do those two roles work together in practice? Because support and advocacy can look very different from one another. So how does REACH as an organization balance operating in those two spaces, and what is some of the advocacy work that you guys are doing?
So we are actively collaborating with the Ministry of Education
Mm-hmm.
to assist and to add, I guess, our 2 cents
Mm-hmm.
to the legislation surrounding people who have learning differences, people who have neurological differences, people who have um, autism spectrum disorder in addition to other related challenges. And so we've had several um, meetings, been active on several uh, efforts with regards to new legislation and proposed legislation
Mhm.
for Ministry of Education in particular. I know that I've been a part of those types of meetings. We have also been a part of, dealing with with social services and with the Disabilities Council, and so we're actively involved in all of those spheres, and we are always open to collaborative meetings and lending our our experience, and really speaking up for those children who are not, and families who are not able to get into those spaces and to speak
Mhm.
up for themselves. And so our relationship with Ministry of Education, with social services, with disabilities affairs, gives us the space to be able to put in our recommendations based on what we know our parents are facing.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you, where do you think the Bahamas still has the most work to do when it comes to autism support? Because you have spaces like education, healthcare, public services, workplaces, and then general public awareness. Where do you think we as a country still have the most work to do in this area?
So um, I think that there's a lot of public education that needs to happen.
Okay.
I would love to see a public education campaign spearheaded by the government, but also by REACH and other organizations like the Down Syndrome Association, like Disabilities Affairs, like social services, like special services at the Ministry of Education,
Hmm.
to really, um, you know, put out public service announcements, billboards, uh, commercials, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, so that uh, more people not only hear about um, the words surrounded by autism spectrum disorder, but also hear from the families, hear from the teachers,
Hmm.
hear from the mothers and the children about what this journey means, what these challenges means, and how can I, as a member of the public who does who does not have a child on the spectrum, what can I do? I think that we would do well as a country if we were to really get a good public educational campaign going, just to educate our population about what it means to have a neurodevelopmental disorder. What
Hmm.
does that mean?
Yeah. I think that's I think you're absolutely right. And I think that was a part of the reason why we wanted to get you guys on the show to kind of talk about the work that you're doing, talk about the importance of it, your mission, and all of those sorts of things, so that we can help to educate the public about, what it looks like, what it feels like. We're gonna continue to try and have this conversation and expand it into a lot of different areas and aspects of the autism and the spectrum experience, in order to continue to help and drive that conversation forward as well. But as we prepare to wrap up our conversation, one of the things I did wanted to kind of circle back to, just a reminder for people: what are some of the ways that Reach is actively supporting the community through its programs and initiatives?
So of course, April is an extremely busy month for us.
Mm-hmm.
So there are lots of things that are happening during the month of April. We've just come off our Light It Up Blue ceremony, which was in Rosin Square. That was our big kickoff. We've had other events that have been happening throughout the month of April. We had the Easter egg hunt.
Mm-hmm.
We had a church service. We Every Friday is our T-shirt day, and we are encouraging corporate Bahamas and the public to get a Reach T-shirt. And even if you don't get a Reach T-shirt, just wear some blue, just to show your support for people who are on the autism spectrum. We are encouraging you to also get involved um, by buying raffle tickets. We also have a raffle coming up. Now, the raffle is not going to be during the month of April,
Okay.
although we are just getting ready to sell tickets. The raffle is going to be held at the end of May. Um, but also, you can call the Reach office about getting raffle tickets. As far as just support, just learn more. You learn as much as you can about autism spectrum disorder. Try and come out to some meetings. Our parent support meetings are usually at the end of every month.
Okay.
But yeah, we always enjoy, having new people at our parent support group meetings, and also having new people at all of our events.
Okay.
And so the Reach office number, if you don't mind me saying,
Sure.
is 4123 328 4123. That's the number at the Reach office. And there's also another number, 477 6016. And that's the Reach office numbers. Our offices are on the QC Queens College campus, just before you go into the gates. So if you go into QC, those buildings on the left-hand side, right next to the Galaxy bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the Reach offices are.
Okay. Two more things as we close and we let you go. You're obviously someone who's been working in the community for a while. What progress gives you hope when you look at how autism is being understood and addressed in the Bahamas today?
The hope that I experience is seeing children whose um, who were having a very, very difficult time when I see them. So I work with children who are 2, 3, 4, and 5 years old. So I see the little ones. And so my hope comes in seeing those children who were having a very, very challenging time when they were 2 and 3 years old. And then when I see them later on, when they're 6, 7, 10, 15 years old, and seeing the progress that they have made, seeing that they actually can, as you said before, go on to lead very fulfilling lives,
Mm-hmm.
that these kids with therapy, can go on to lead very, very fulfilling and impactful lives.
Okay. And one last thing before I let you go, how can the public support the vision of Reach continuing on in the future?
They can volunteer
Mm.
for a Reach event. They can volunteer to come in and learn more about autism. So um, volunteer opportunities happen all the time, because actually, like I said, we are always doing something at the Reach office. There's always either respite care or some other activity that's happening. On a Saturday, we have a young adult club,
Mm.
where young adults who are over school age, so they would be 19, 20, 25, 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Those children are hosted at the Reach office, and they have a Saturday of activities. And it's a really, really touching time where they are either participating in activities right there on the campus, or they are hosted at different activities here around New Providence. And it's encouraging to see corporate Bahamas, um, you know, getting involved. Um, it's encouraging to see corporate Bahamas not just give money, but also to give support by volunteering. So oftentimes, for example, Kalina, or
Mm-hmm.
other companies like that, their employees would volunteer at different events. So I encourage the public to call the REACH office, come to the REACH office, learn how you can get involved, and just support a child who is on the spectrum, just in your own way, in your own community, by talking to a parent, by not being that judgmental person that they would meet in the Bangora church, but that supportive person that they meet at the Bangora church.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, Greer, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on the show and talk about the work of REACH, its mission, some of the events and activities that you have coming up, as well as just your overall goals for how you want to support and advocate for children and families who are dealing with being on the autism spectrums. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Awesome. And we'll definitely look to have you back on, to continue this conversation, maybe expand, go a little bit deeper, potentially get, a parent or parents on to kind of talk about their experiences to continue this educational effort.
Sure, that would be great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so that was Greer Bain, our guest today on Vital Voices, a board member at REACH Bahamas, and we want to thank her for joining and giving her insight and her heart on the important work that's being done through REACH Bahamas. Conversations like this remind us that inclusion is commitment and not just an idea. It requires listening, learning, advocacy, and a willingness to build communities where every individual is valued and supported. We also want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning into Vital Voices. And until next time, stay informed, stay connected, stay well, and stay tuned for the next Vital Voice. Are you enjoying Vital Voices? Do you find our conversations educational, engaging, and inspiring? Then like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell to keep updated on new episodes and more.
Vital Voices is a production of Tag Studios and is proudly brought to you each week by our sponsor, Wellspring Lifestyle Group, where you can find freedom and transformation through whole person health.
Why you purchase?